All right, so I'm going to explain just a little bit about what this gathering is. It's obviously a new thing we haven't tried before exactly. So we're going to want to kind of create a different category for it so we can understand what this is. So the reason why we're calling it Equipping Fort Thomas, so the first word there is equipping. We want these teaching nights to be intensely practical. So the goal is that we're going to actually think about a particular kind of action or skill, something that you know at the end of the night. Maybe I came in here and I didn't really know how to do that or why I should, and then we're going to try to cover that. And so the goal of this is to really allow you guys to think about, like for tonight, we're talking about initiating a prayer gathering. So if you guys have any questions, like as we move through the night, or especially as we get towards the end and you're like, this is what's holding me up, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do, without answering this question, that would be something you guys really want to kind of ask, and we want to cover all that stuff. So part of that is a lot of these are going to be really narrow. So in other words, we're going to try to cover a very specific topic in a narrow fashion. We're not trying to be really broad. These aren't really broad teachings. These are really very, very specific. So because of that, as you guys see on the Facebook group, different topics coming up, and you're like, I don't know if that one applies to me so much. Don't feel any pressure to come on those nights because we're going to really just talk about that. But if you think that it would be something you're interested in or think might apply to you or apply to somebody who's not generally connected, make sure to invite them, and we'd love to cover that. So some weeks are going to probably be really applicable or really relevant, some less so. Like for example, tonight, if you come out of this and you're like, wow, I really need to think about this whole idea of getting a prayer gathering going or participating in one, instead of like coming right back to the next activation, which might be on a completely different topic and might actually distract what the Holy Spirit is doing in you. I think it's really important that you guys try to discern what it is, kind of what season you're in, what God is doing in you, and not kind of ride different waves and look at different activations that may not be what is applying to you during that season. So these are going to be really narrow in that sense. These are going to be intentionally local. Part of what we're trying to do here, why does it say Fort Thomas? Why not like just equipping or equipping Cincinnati or do something more broad? We really believe that one of the expressions that has been lost in the church is the idea of a city church, where we actually only ask the question, what does our area need? And then we actually try to address that specifically with a training or an equipping. That's really what we're doing with Fort Thomas. And so what this is, if you live here, if you live like within 5 miles of Fort Thomas, you should definitely feel like you're a part of this. Then you need to let us know. Dave Reeves, one of the things he's going to be doing is bringing together a lot of different topics. And so what he's trying to do is pray through and talk to people in Fort Thomas. What is it that you feel like you really need? What kind of equipping do you feel like would be really useful? That's why we're doing this particular training, because this was a specific question people in Fort Thomas had. And so that's going to be what's driving the types of topics that we're going to do, is what's happening locally. And then from people from other areas, what we're telling them is, we would love to go and equip your area with whatever it is that you guys are really wrestling with. So we've told a lot of people in different places, hey, if you feel free to come to these are open to everyone. But if let's say you're here and you're from a different area and you're like, wow, that would be really useful with the community that I'm a part of or whatever, then let us know and we'll come and do this exact same equipping in your area. Don't wait for 2 years to go by and hope that it comes back here and then bring everybody from your area to that equipping. Like just initiate it and say, come to my house, we're going to do an activation on prayer meetings. And so I'm hoping that the way that we're designing these, that we can do, like, I would love to do this prayer meeting equipping, many times in different environments for different groups. And so different people we're going to be bringing in to do equippings are going to be thinking the same thing. So these are going to be really intentionally local, topically diverse. Because of the way that we're actually designing the topics, we're not really doing a series. So, we could do a topic on like a really sort of high level discussion about what is the church, and the next week we could dive super deep into motherhood. These are not necessarily going to be connected. Again, what's really driving the topics is what does the area need, and so that's going to be how we're going to do this. And then these are also going to be really biblically grounded. So one of the things we're going to do tonight, and I really hope happens at these equippings is that we actually sort of learn this stuff through particular texts of Scripture. So we're going to spend a little time doing a midrash. This environment might be a little bit challenging, but you guys will have to step up and participate. So we're going to have more of a larger setting where we'll have like a U. That'll make it a little easier. But we want to do a midrash and just talk through scriptures that apply to that topic, so that we make sure that we're not interpreting and spending all of our time talking about somebody's opinion about a topic. That's one of the biggest reasons why there's a lot of disunity in the church, is because we build our practices on the opinions of one strategist. And then we go on, and when you go and start to follow a different strategist, it could be completely different. So it's important that we kind of build from the same foundation. It's the only way that there could really be unity in the body. And so we're going to try to make sure that everything's grounded in the Scriptures and in the practices that we find there. So that's what this is. A couple of things that this is not. This is not a weekly worship service, so don't put this in. There's a lot of things weekly worship services are designed to accomplish. This is, again, really narrow. Like, we're going to just talk about prayer meetings tonight. That's what we're talking about. So all of the equippings are going to be that way. Once a month, we're going to do a prophetic worship gathering here. So that's the last Sunday night of every month. So next Sunday night, there's going to be something that's just built around prayer and worship. And what we're trying to do is really listen to what the Holy Spirit's saying to our city. So that if you're coming next week to that gathering, I'm really going to ask you guys, be in prayer, carve off even like a prayer time this week to ask God what is on His heart for our city. And then we're going to just pray into that and try to share those insights with each other. So that's going to be next week. And we're going to spend time before the Lord. So that's going to be the last Sunday of every month. The other ones are all going to be equippings. And so I would think of this more like each event is sort of like a separate event. It just all happens to happen on Sunday night. So every week you can think about whether or not that applies to you. So this isn't designed for a single local congregation or network. This is designed for a region. That's what we're really going for. And then this is not something you should ever feel guilty for skipping. So if it's like, oh, I don't know that applies, don't feel like, oh, I've got this in my weekly rhythm and I need to be there every single time. That's really not what this is. If the topic really applies to you, and it's where you're at spiritually, or a question you're asking, or something you feel like God's trying to teach you, or if you're discipling someone who may be asking a question like this, you should encourage them to come. Like this, that's what this is really for, as opposed to something that we're all sort of participating in. Hopefully, Max, if you guys have any questions about that, let me know. Or if you guys have questions afterward, you can ask. But that's sort of what we're doing. This is like always, it's sort of an experiment we're going to try. One of the things that we just heard from multiple people, both just people that were, talking to us about something that was lacking, and people that were actually coming from out of town and giving us prophecies, is there was not enough teaching going on, and that we weren't doing enough real feeding and equipping. And so this is in large part a response to that. We're trying to be obedient and say, okay, we need to make sure that we're actively, continuously equipping and teaching people. So that's part of the reason why this really got a lot of attention, and we wanted to kick this off. Just a couple other things, I guess, is that Britton is kind of leading a team that's handling the logistics. There's a lot of people involved. Tom's involved, Nick's involved, a bunch of different people are going to be helping. The Stanios are helping with childcare. So we've got a really awesome team helping us set everything up, figure all this out, make this sustainable. What I told them is, if I knew I could just show up in a building, on Sunday night and teach, and I didn't have to think about childcare or, the projector or the room or whatever, then my energy would be like exponentially higher for being able to do this, because that stuff I'm not good at if you don't know me. So these guys are the ones really creating the platform to make this possible. So I'm super jazzed that we've got people here that are willing to make that commitment and that they're gifted at that. So this part of the body is coming together, getting this thing done. So it's been awesome. Okay, we're using this word. We're going to use this word a lot at these equippings, called an activation. So I want to talk for just a second about this. What is an activation? So it's when you come into a training not knowing how to do something, not knowing why to do something, and leave choosing to put a specific practice into action. So we actually want there to be a change that happens while we're doing the training, so that something different actually occurs, as opposed to I think a lot of times teachings, you can sit back in very much of a passive mode, like, oh, this is interesting information. We're really hoping that that's not what this is. If you're coming here, there needs to be a real huge question right at the front of your mind, and that is, how am I going to put this into practice? Or if you're not convinced that you should do it, then that should be in the forefront of your mind. Why should I put this into practice? But what we're really trying to drive at is activating something so that the body is actually changed as a result of what we're talking about. So that's what we're shooting for. So typically these activations, the way I'm going to design mine, I think, are going to have 3 sections. The first I'm going to talk about, and this is going to apply to tonight in the prayer meeting discussion, we're going to talk about the current state of this practice. Where are we at right now? How is the church doing? What are our assumptions about this practice? How are we experiencing it? That's going to be a huge part. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to midrash specific passages that relate to this practice to see, okay, is there a biblical precedent for doing this? And if so, what is it? So let's get at the heart of the truth of the why behind the practice. So we're going to participate in that tonight. And then we're going to get, the last third is really going to be saying, how do we get started? Like, what are the really practical next steps? If I wanted to do this week, what would I do? So that's what we're doing. Some of these activations are going to be on topics that I think there are places and lots of people in the church that are doing this really well. Some of them are going to be in a little different category that we're going to call a restoration. This particular practice, at least for Christians in the West, is more of a restoration. And that's the type of activation it is. So I want to talk just a minute about the difference, because a restoration is actually a lot more challenging type of activation. So let me talk to you guys about it. So what is a restoration? It's when there's an ancient biblical practice or belief that has been largely forgotten. The way the restoration feels is a restoration feels like trying hard to remember something that you feel you forgot, but you never really knew. So you're like, well, it feels really right. And our brains is funny. I was reading a book about this. They specifically said that our brains are wired that if somebody asks you a question and it's somewhere in your brain, you have the feeling that you know it, and usually you're right, and so then it pops into your head at some point, and you're like, oh, I'll think about that. That's a really bizarre idea, though, if you think about it, like that you know it, but you don't know what it is. That's a really weird feeling, and that's sort of the way restorations feel. Like you're like, this feels right, and it feels like it's sort of in my DNA somewhere, but I've never done it. I don't know if I've ever seen it. Restorations often feel that way. The process of restoring something is like putting a puzzle together one piece at a time, running out of pieces before it's done, and then searching for the next piece. So this has been my experience with restorations. There's restorations I feel like I started to see a picture 10 years ago, and I've been on search, and maybe once a year I'll find another piece, and I'm like, oh, that's where that goes. And so because of that, you have to sign up for, when you're involved in restorations, that they're always messy and constantly evolving. So this is not going to be the final word on how to do a prayer gathering, because this area is very much evolving. I'm going to be searching for missing puzzle pieces. Some of you guys tonight may have, and probably do have, pieces of the puzzle that I don't have, and maybe that nobody else in this room has. And so that's going to be really important, that when we're involved in a restoration, that we all really actively say, hey, I actually have experienced this, and this is what it felt like, or this is what we did. That's going to be really important. But restorations are tough, because if you're the kind of person who wants to be told what to do, exactly how to do it, and when to do it, and why to do it, and then you just want to go and do it, the restorations are really frustrating for that kind of person. You have to really be willing to experiment a little bit, sort of put your toe in the water, and then go out and make adjustments as you go along. That's going to be where this is coming from. And I feel like definitely for our family, for a lot of families here, the whole idea of a prayer meeting, a prayer gathering has been something that we've really been trying to navigate as a restoration, as opposed to something that it's not a model. We're not reading this in a book somewhere. There's not a chapter in the Bible that says step 1, step 2, step 3, and we're just following it. We weren't trained by somebody how to do this. So all those things, that would be great. I wish we had all those things. We don't have any of those things. And so we're really trying to understand this, and we're gleaning from other communities, other places, and other practices. But it is like putting a puzzle together as opposed to being sort of trained up in it. So